Hey there, health aficionados. Welcome to another riveting episode of PopHealth Week on Healthcare Now Radio. I'm Greg Masters, your co-host and the man behind the curtains, pulling the strings at Health Innovation Media. Joining me in our digital wonderland of a studio is the one and only Fred Goldstein, the co-architect of PopHealth Week and reigning president of Accountable Health, LLC. PopHealth Week is your go-to virtual salon where the who's who of healthcare, from payers and providers to patients and policymakers, gather to share best practices in population health management and public health innovation. Want to slide into our lineup with a Where's the Beef contribution? Find us at www.popupstudio.productions or tweet us at GregMastersMPH for me, and that's Greg with two G's, mind you, and Fred at FS Goldstein, respectively. You can also catch Fred at www.accountablehealthllc.com. And today we're stoked to present three powerful women associated with HBA, and that is the Healthcare Business Women's Association. Our guests are Mary Stutz, its Chief Executive Officer, Nikki Jones, the Chief People and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and Marcia Anderson, the Senior Director and Global Head for the Gender Parity Collective and Initiative by HBA. That focuses on prompting gender equality in the healthcare industry. Fred, the stage is yours.
Thanks so much, Greg. And Mary, Nikki, and Marcia, welcome to PopHealth Week.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to see you. Glad to be here.
Great to be here. Thank you for having us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and sorry for the little technical difficulties we had to start the last show. So we're back at it. So, Mary, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and the organization?
Absolutely. So I am Mary Stutz, and I'm the CEO of the Healthcare Business Women's Association. We are a professional trade association located in 74 countries on 6 continents, every continent except Antarctica. And our mission is to develop women in the business of healthcare. And that is so that ultimately we are also advancing health equity. I have been working in the healthcare space for many years, started my healthcare career at Kaiser Permanente, and then I was also at United Health Group. I've worked on the provider side as well as the payer side, as well as biotech and pharma, working with Bayer, or Bayer as they say in Germany, Genentech, Bristol Myers Squibb. And I also did a stint on the digital health side with Comcast, NBC Universal. And I was the first Global Inclusion Health Equity Officer for Stanford Healthcare. And currently now, as I mentioned, I'm with the HBA, and I've been in that role just since April. I was on the board of the HBA. But you know, I've always focused on advancing women in leadership and people of color. And as you know, the healthcare workforce is 70% female. The public health workforce is 80% female. And one of the things of concern right now is that those women are leaving the healthcare workforce in droves. And so while I know at this amazing conference, the THIN conference that we were at now, there's a lot of focus on health disparities and controlling costs and all of that, but there is a even bigger looming healthcare crisis, which is the workforce of the future, and keeping women in that workforce while we also are diversifying and bringing in more diverse people in that workforce, so that ideally we will help impact and reduce the health disparities. So at our panel that I participated in, we were very much focused on the, if you will, integration of diversity, equity, and inclusion with health equity. And we know that people need to understand and practice inclusive leadership behaviors if they are really going to provide equitable care to all of their patients. And we know right now that is not happening, and we're seeing things like people of color not being offered the option to participate in clinical trials. I did the first diversity in clinical trials initiative at Genentech. I know I sound anxious, but they didn't pay attention to child labor laws. I did do that first diversity in clinical trials initiative at Genentech, and it's sad to say that a lot of things we found back then are still the case now. Not only was it people of color who were not being offered trials, but at that time, women, no matter what their race or ethnicity, were not being offered the option to participate in clinical trials. And we also found that once the drugs were approved, the newest, most innovative therapies also were not being offered to people of color. So, and then we had situations like the George Floyd murder, which shone the light on social injustice, and we saw this increase of companies hiring chief diversity officers. But when I was named the first diversity inclusion officer at Stanford, it was during the Me Too movement. And it was a result of the injustices that women had been facing in the workplace over the years, in the harassment and lawsuits and all of those things. And then, of course, you continue on with COVID. And then COVID shone the spotlight on the health disparities and the fact that people of color were dying way more than non-people of color. And so you saw another wave of not only hiring chief diversity officers, but also chief health equity officers. And so that's been a big theme here. But at the end of the day, people most trust people who look like them. And what that means is we need to make sure that we have a diverse and inclusive workforce. And in order for us to do that, companies need to make sure that they are very intentionally creating strategies to not only hire a diverse workforce, that's just the tip of the iceberg, but what's happening to those people after they get in your organization. So it's not about just hiring a diverse workforce, but it's about including them. And what I mean by that, the definition of inclusion and what we ask employees: do you feel valued, celebrated, respected? Last two are critical. Have access to the same opportunities as everyone else, and are being treated fairly or the same as everyone else. When I have done that research, and I've done it at a lot of different companies, even the white people will say, I feel that I have all five of those things, but that I don't see that happening for the other diverse employees in my organization. So there needs to be very intentional and focused programs and metrics. It's interesting that whenever you create a strategy, you know that you have to have goals, you got to have metrics, you've got to be able to show your progress. But when you start talking about diversity and inclusion, and you talk about metrics and goals, it's like, oh no, we don't want quotas. There are no quotas. How's it a quota when it's diversity and inclusion, but it's metrics when it's your strategy? So these are the kinds of things that we have to fight.
And just on that, is part of that also ensuring we have appropriate development opportunities within organizations too?
That's right.
Because oftentimes, you know, I may go in an organization, I have certain skill sets, but I need to develop in certain areas, and everybody else has their own that they need to then also develop. And so those need to be set up to help people so that they can advance appropriately, right?
Well, and this is a key piece. The development piece is huge. It's why the HBA is so successful. But even in corporations, when we're working with staff, one of the big mistakes companies make is that they hire in these new folks into the organization, a lot of times right out of college, and you want to hold on to them. So what do? We promote them. But if you haven't trained them how to be a manager and to manage people, then they don't know how to practice inclusive leadership. They will take a very punitive approach to how they manage and lead people. And what we've found is that women, to a certain extent, and people of color are put on PIPs, performance improvement plans more, and they are involuntarily terminated more. And unfortunately, that is something we see happening with male and female managers because, if people don't have that roadmap to what inclusive leadership looks like, they're going to emulate whatever it is they have seen in the company, which is why the development is so important. And when you look at the millennials and the Gen Z, they want career development. In other words, they want to sit with their manager and have a discussion about where is my career going in the next 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. If the managers don't know how to have that conversation with them, those people are going to leave and go to a company that has that conversation. So, and it's a global challenge, which is why the HBA has its Global Gender Parity Collaborative, which is an amazing program that's led by Nikki Jones, our Chief Diversity Officer. So I'm going to ask Nikki to share a little bit more about the Gender Parity Collaborative for the audience.
Awesome. Thank you, Mary. To our CEO at the Healthcare Business Women's Association, I'm Nikki Jones. I'm the Chief People and DE&I Officer at the HBA. Been there about 14 years, started out in the finance function, and then about 5 years ago made the career switch, which is what we really promote our volunteers to do at the HBA. Own your career. Where's your passion? Find it. Get certified. And that's actually what I did. So I moved from finance into HR, got certified through the Society for Human Resource Management, SHRM, and have been on this journey with a people passion first for the last 5 years, and most recently into the role of diversity, equity, and inclusion for the organization. So as Mary mentioned, as a leadership development organization, we're a membership association. We allow women to come to HBA, be able to hone their individual skills, find out where they need development, and we allow them to go through our leadership framework. We have programs in local areas, regional areas, globally, but then we also give them the opportunity to volunteer. To be in leadership roles. That's something that perhaps they may not have been able to get inside of their own jobs. So many times along the career progression for women, they want to be advanced, they want to be promoted, but they're ultimately told, you don't have this competency. You've never managed a team. You've never managed a P&L. You don't know. They can come to HBA with our volunteer structure, the way that we have set up, gain those skill sets, go back into their workplace, and actually see a track of promotions and advancement, which goes back to our story. We are trying to continue to develop the leadership of the future. Going back to Mary's point about women in the workforce, that we comprise more than 70% of the workforce, and in the healthcare industry in particular, at every level of leadership, even to healthcare workers and hospitals, it's mostly women, but they're leaving in droves the industry for a number of reasons. So what we do is, one, to make sure that these women are prepared to accept leadership roles so they can advance, so they can increase their pay capacity. But then we also flip and work on the other side with the companies. Companies, what are you doing to make these women want to leave the workforce? What's happening with your policies, practices, and procedures that you're not exhibiting really being an inclusive workplace? So the Gender Parity Collaborative was started in 2018 as a means to help companies' senior leaders really focus in on how to create inclusive workplaces and eradicating the systemic issues that we're really finding are preventing women from advancing. So whether that's literally just having access to opportunities for senior leadership, because our story is, if you have gender balanced leadership, you then will be able to impact decisions, better decision making, which then will benefit the patient, which then will contribute to health equity and really trying to figure out what's causing the health disparities. So you've got to have the voice at the table. So we really focus on gender balanced leadership.
Just tuning in, you're listening to Pop Health Week on Healthcare Now Radio. Our guests are three executives from the Healthcare Business Women's Association, or HBA, and that is Mary Stutz, its Chief Executive Officer, Nikki M. Jones, its Chief People and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and Marcia Anderson, the Senior Director and Global Head for the Gender Parity Collective and HBA Initiative.
And it also speaks to it directly impacts the bottom line.
Yes, absolutely.
They're more financially productive. And even just, one employee leaving your company, it's up to 18 months salary to replace an employee who leaves your organization. Can cost up to that much. So it behooves the companies to figure out not only how to hire folks, but how to keep them and how to develop them and have them be leaders. And so that's a huge piece for us. And as Nikki said, we have over 180 corporate partners. They represent over 5 million employees total. And we have corporate partners across the whole health ecosystem because much like I've worked across the health ecosystem, most women want that type of career path as well. And so making sure that we have that type of representation as we are doing our programs and they have that exposure to those different parts of the industry is a huge part of our agenda as well. And we've just hired Marcia, and she's going to be taking over, helping to continue our gender parity collaborative, because as Nikki was talking, one of the things I wanted to point out is, we are collecting data on gender parity as a part of that program, which is going to be very valuable in helping companies and society overall to understand what needs to happen to achieve gender parity, what programs work, what kinds of things need to happen. And so it's very important for us to keep that work going, and Marcia's going to be doing that.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. I am Marcia Anderson, and I am the recently hired Senior Director and Global Head of the Gender Parity Collaborative, affectionately known as the GPC. So I am a little less than 3 weeks on the job.
So you're an expert?
Yes.
You're ready to go.
We're trained and ready to go.
Trained and ready to go.
Good for
these
you.
fabulous and dynamic women that I'm working with. I have been in the healthcare space for about 3 decades, primarily in biopharma. I've also spent some time on the payer side in various roles, sales leadership, marketing, trading, sales operations, you name it. And throughout my career, I've had the opportunity to participate in field diversity initiatives, field diversity teams, work with employee resource groups, also known as ERGs, and leading in that space as well. So as many women in particular, as well as our allies who work in the biopharma space on the corporate side, many of us are working our day jobs, so to speak, and sort of on the side, you are working on your passion, right? Whether that's diversity, equity, inclusion, women in leadership, women in sales leadership. And so it's something I've always had an interest and a passion in. And I'm at the point in my career where the right time happened, the right place happened, the right opportunity. With my previous employer, we were very big partners of HBA, so I had the opportunity to become familiar with the organization. And so conversations took place, and I am now here. And as both Nikki and Mary pointed out, you're talking about the individual development of leaders, women leaders. What's so nice and so different about the GPC, which I appreciate, is the fact that we're trying to impact the system itself. Taking right now 13 of our corporate partners that have an interest in looking at the problem and finding solutions to it in a systemic way to really impact the industry. As you'll find, and I have found in my career, many women cross different companies. So I've been at a few companies as well as Mary. And so we know each other and we all talk, and we look for ways to collaborate. And that's what women do anyway. We look for ways to collaborate, and we're looking at even programs with 2 of our larger companies coming together later in the year to focus on mentoring and women in development. Well, that's essentially what the GPC is doing. We are benchmarking where we are. We're looking at a baseline. We're then looking at the collection of data. And there's trust there, right? Because these companies are competitors. But there's a trust that's there that we're looking to move forward. And it's not just that it's the right thing to do, but it's also a business reason. There's a business reason to do it. So we are essentially a think tank. We will put our heads together, develop strategies, develop solutions, execute, and hold ourselves accountable and look back and say, okay, what have we actually done? My personal leadership philosophy has always been accountability, commitment, trust, and development. And that is how I see myself in this role, is leading the GPC to move forward and really impact change, not just in the individual, but also from a system, from a systemic point of view.
Can you talk about, you've mentioned baselines and developing these measures. What sort of measures should we be grabbing? What are the pieces or elements we should be looking at?
Well, I think we should be looking at probably one of the most obvious is pay.
Right.
We're also looking at the promotion of women within organizations. We're looking at recruitment. So usually you bring them in, right? But it's what's happening when they're there, and that's at each level of their development. So, Mary was talking about bringing in people at the college level, entry level, and many times what we do is we try to keep them, and so we promote them. I've seen this, and they haven't necessarily been trained to be leaders. So it's how do you impact them as soon as they come through the door? You've already identified the talent because you've made the decision to hire them. Now train them. Let's train them so that they can be effective leaders at every level in the organization. Middle management, as they move up the chain, senior leadership, the C-suite. Let's look at them from start to progression throughout the organization. So these are the types of things I think we need to be looking at.
And there's one other element to the data. It's also looking at leadership, as I mentioned before, gender balanced leadership.
Right.
Mm-hmm. If you go to these companies and look at the websites, look at the leadership.
Yes.
Yes, there's one demographic. We love you. We absolutely love you. But again, in terms of the diversity, making sure there's representation.
Yes.
So those are the types of numbers that we challenge these companies that have come together. We said, show us your data. What does your leadership team look like? And how do we map out a plan for it to look like that?
And, I want to ask you this because obviously you've been a trendsetter. First this, first that. And so, which is great. I mean, that's unbelievable. I love
Exactly.
sitting with people who have set something and started something down a road, But it's a road. We got to go. Obviously, maybe you've been able to say, look, we now have progress because we've recognized that we need to get studies this way and this and that. So where are we today?
Yeah.
And I assume we have pretty ways to go, which goes as quick as we could make it happen if we decide to make it happen. Is that?
So what makes the difference, and you're absolutely right, from doing this over these past 30 years, the main thing that leaders respond to, and I mean the leaders of today that may not be as diverse, is data. When I was at Genentech, our CEO said something that stuck with all of us. It's like, in God we trust, all else must bring the data.
Trust and verify.
Yes, trust and verify. So the GPC and the data collection, so one of the ways that we've moved the needle on this, and the needle is moving, but the needle is moving because we are talking directly to the staff. And this was not happening before. This is another thing that I kind of pioneered, this whole idea of listening tours. So when I come into an organization and they say, we want you to lead our inclusion and diversity or help us with whatever it is, the challenge is, okay, you got to give me time to talk to the staff and the stakeholders one-on-one in person, not a survey because people are insulted. To take that time and hear what is the real work experience, real life experience of the cross-section of your employees and bring that data back to the leaders, it's mind-boggling for them. It is transformative. For them to hear the real stories, and of course the employees are anonymous, so I'm not saying who, but I'm giving them, and that's the whole thing, the whole idea of the recurring themes. That's my book that we talked about here, recurring themes of exclusion in the workplace, because that's what I've heard. Not only are the employees not being included, they're being deliberately excluded. So it's recurring themes of exclusion. And when leaders hear that kind of data, they are mortified, because who wants to lead a company like that? They don't want to. And that's why I always emphasize, assume good intentions. I don't think anybody gets up every day saying, okay, I'm going to go out and create, commit some microaggressions today. Nobody does that intentionally, yet it's happening. So we need to understand, and then that's why you have to take that time, starting with your senior-most leaders. One of the programs I curated is an inclusive leadership program when I was at Stanford, and all of the research that went with that, but starting with the senior-most leaders to help them have this roadmap to what inclusive leadership looks like, and then cascade it down to all of your leaders in the organization so that they understand how they're supposed to behave and hold them accountable, building in that accountability piece so that there's an accountability metric, and they have to have a partner, buddy up. All of these things, that's what's making a difference, because I have to tell you, some of the companies, when I talk to them, everybody talks about unconscious bias. And most of these companies, when they did the unconscious bias training, the acts of microaggression actually increased. You know why? Because when you take unconscious bias training, it's like, well, you're biased, I'm biased, we're all biased, so hey,
So
we're
let's just let it rip.
It's true, and this is what the leaders said to me, which led me to create the Inclusive Leadership Workshop. They said, quite frankly, I know I'm biased, but nobody has told me what to do about it. So that's why, and this is the thing with most companies, a lot of programs are out there now and all kinds of things happening, but my point is we are making progress, and the employees now understand the power of their voice. So people are not suffering in silence like they used to do, because that's not going to help. And then companies now are actually tracking the ESG requirements. Have really helped a lot, because as we heard on some of the panels today, it's not just about you saying that you're doing it, but if you want to do business with us, if you want to be a vendor, as well as our own company, we want to see your numbers. How are you treating your people?
Right.
How diverse is your workforce? Are they being promoted? Are they, being elevated in the company? Are they staying?
Yeah, and I think what's critically important, especially given the fact that the show is called PopHealth Week, is you're working to fix the inside of healthcare, which will fix the
That's
outside
right.
of
That's
healthcare.
right.
Bingo.
Because
right.
you've got now people who see people that look like them,
Yes.
who are treated by people who look like them,
Yes.
and who can then go ahead and make that whole disparity issue that we know exists outside
Yes.
better.
But we also need to hold people accountable
Yes.
who are there. And so this is one of the
Absolutely.
first things folks tell us when they bring us in is, we want you to go find all the diverse doctors that you can find when you're trying to help with enrolling their trial or launching their new drug. It's like, they don't exist, right? So we're working to get more diverse physicians and all that, but we need to hold the people accountable we have now, which is why the cultural humility training that I also created, that we do with companies to train the workforce that they have to be more culturally humble, to listen, because most of the disparities when you talk to people of color, it's the doctor didn't listen to me. It starts with the staff. We heard that today in the panel. The treatment starts with the staff and how the staff even brings them in, listens to them, get them to the right doctor. So that piece is, it's bringing in more diverse people, but it's also helping the people who are already there to be more culturally humble.
Absolutely. So Mary, Nikki, and Marcia, I'd like to thank you all for coming on PopHealth Week. We could probably go on for hours with this.
Yes.
And
Thank
thanks
you
for all
so
that you're
much.
doing.
This is
Thank you.
great. Thank you for the opportunity.
so much.
Love it.
Absolutely. And back to you, Greg.
And that, dear friends, is a wrap. A huge shout out to our guests from HBA, the Healthcare Business Women's Association. We've been speaking with Mary Stutz, the Chief Executive Officer, Nikki M. Jones, its Chief People and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and Marcia Anderson, the Senior Director, Global Head, Gender Parity Collective and HBA Initiative. We want to thank our worldwide audience for tuning in. To keep tabs on their work at HBA, go to www.hbanet.org and do follow their individual and collective work on Twitter via @RealDealChange for Mary, @Marcia Anderson for Marcia, and @HBANet for HBA. And finally, if you're digging what you're hearing on PopHealth Week, show us some love. Like, share, and subscribe to never miss out on our healthcare hot takes. Catch us live on Healthcare Now Radio, 5:30 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And for our West Coast peeps, that's 2:30 a.m., 10:30 a.m., and 6:30 p.m. Pacific. From the PopHealth Week crew, Brett Goldstein and yours truly, Greg Masters. Stay safe, everyone. Keep thriving, and until next time, adios.